Good morning, Bill. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Well, um, okay, except my phone just conked out, so I gotta go talk to Verizon this morning.
Oh no. Yeah,
Yeah.
my phone got wet, so it's sitting in a bowl of rice this morning. So super late.
Well, maybe I should try that solution.
It usually
Is
works
it brown
wonders
rice
around
or white rice?
white rice.
Oh, okay.
What's
Morning,
happening?
Bill.
You know, just when you need your phone and all of a sudden it's gone.
Yeah, yeah.
So how are you doing?
Good. I get to go visit some family this weekend, so I'm excited. I haven't been home since Christmas, so it'll be a
Oh,
good
that's great. Where's your family?
back in Central Illinois in a little farming community over there. So
In Illinois. Yeah.
yep.
Yeah, I got an ex-brother-in-law in Illinois, and he's outside of Chicago area
Okay.
someplace. He's
Yeah.
a forester, and
Okay, cool.
he went to what's the name of that Southern Illinois or something like
Oh
that?
yeah, SIUE.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you go there?
No, I went to Iowa State. So
Iowa State. Oh, an
yeah.
Iowa Stater.
Yep. So
Well, obviously you found a good sweet spot here in Colorado. So
yes, yes. I'm very much enjoying it. It's officially my 1 year anniversary in Colorado. So
well, that's great.
excited. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, once you get to know the state, you're just going to fall more in love with it. That's just the way it goes.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we've done some exploring this summer, we've been to 3 national parks and um just a few small towns, so it's been fun.
Yeah. We'll get to Silverton.
Okay. Yeah, we have
Yeah.
not been there yet.
Down south. And that's the Weminuche Wilderness area. And it's a great place to go backpacking. And,
Okay.
uh, there's trails and you can take the railroad from
Okay.
Silverton down to Durango.
Awesome. Yeah, I've got cousins in Durango.
Oh,
So
there you go.
yeah.
Good. Well, that's great. Well, I've been here I came out here on a business trip and just fell in love with the place and said, I'm going to stay. I had to go
Mhm.
back to California for a year, but it was worth it
Yeah.
to come back here.
Looks like we've got Anne and Susan and Tweed on.
Oh, good.
Yep. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Bear. Hi there.
Good morning.
I'm almost here.
That doesn't sound good.
Go get the dog.
Well, I changed computers, so maybe I've got audio this today. So
That's much better, Bill.
Much
Mhm.
better. Yeah.
Good. I had to uninstall Zoom and reinstall it to get my microphone to work correctly, so I think it's better.
Yeah, no, it's good. I can hear you now.
Good.
Good morning.
Morning.
I
Morning.
can't see.
Let's see, one, two, three. Okay, we do have Susan and Tweed on there as well. I just can't see them. So, Dole or Aaron, can I just well, this is very informal meeting. So Dole and Aaron, do you want to kind of lead things on this?
I think Aaron's going to.
Yeah.
Great.
Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yeah, may I ask if, am I muted?
Yeah, we hear
Yes,
you.
Susan, go ahead.
Okay, do you want me to take minutes?
Yes, I think so.
Okay,
So I just kind of captured this as round one feedback. What I received email comments from Tweed and Susan, but I didn't get anybody else's. So if you sent them, I apologize, I missed them. Something I did, I'm seeing that this label is not showing up right now, but was I took the inspiration imagery that they had for some of these different concepts, and I wrote down what I felt like I heard during our meeting in terms of what we thought of some of these specific images, just so that we could, sort of maybe approve the programming that's shown, but not like how it's showing up just because it's maybe not the Manitou character that we're looking for. So I think for starters, I'm going to go just through these images one by one in terms of what I've said. The images here on this first page are, we'll say, sort of yes images. So we liked the movable chairs because they provided, maximum flexibility in terms of some of these more open spaces to host different kinds of events, whether it be fitness, music, or, a pop-up event. But when those aren't happening, you have the movable tables and chairs to activate that space. However, our performance requirements for those would be that they could withstand the winter weather, would not have to be stored inside since we don't have quite the storage for it that we anticipate, and that they wouldn't maybe be as light as some of these, so that they would be more likely to stay in the plaza, because sometimes with the lighter ones, they have a tendency to wander off. Pollinator garden beds, this is an obvious yes, because we are a pollinator city, and that we would want to continue sort of conversations with the park's staff in terms of how we would plant those to be responsible in terms of maintenance. I have invited Jillian to this meeting today. She did have another conflict, so she'll kind of pop in when her current meeting gets finished. And then I also invited her to the next task force meeting next Thursday, so that she'll be kind of part of these conversations where we're having very sort of plaza heavy conversations.
And then also on the heels of that, we're also going to invite Megan, our events coordinator, as she starts to help look at, I've sent her the drawing. She was going to attend this morning, but she had a last minute thing come up. So she'll start to attend too, to try to get her comments and feedback on some of this as well.
good.
Any comments on those first two images, or do you feel like that summarizes sort of what you guys are feeling about these two images here?
I can't really, well, that's okay. I can't really
I
see.
can zoom in a little bit
Yeah,
more. Here we go.
It looks good to me.
Me too.
Okay.
it's bigger. That's good. Yeah, that's good.
Then the next two images, I'm just going to kind of go down in the column, is yes to art as play, yes to, potential play service in order to support safe climbing, depending on what those fall heights are. But I think if play surface is out of our budget, maybe we craft some of that. It's all about fall height in terms of whether you need it to be a true sort of play surface versus other types of not hard surfaces. And that wherever there is that play where we're sort of anticipating there being kids, that we'd want that to be, defensible space, so that parents would feel safe there and feel like they're able to the kids aren't going to run into a street or run into a parking lot. And then in terms of hardscape paving, yes to pavers with a preference towards permeable if maintenance allows, and conversations with park staff, and prefer something that feels, more historic in terms of a paver, using the Manitou earthy tones in terms of that red and orange and brown family. Grays and pavers, at least in my opinion, tend to be a little bit more modern in feeling. And so since our integral color concrete requirement in Manitou is that red color, red family, I felt like that would be appropriate comments here.
Just a question, just a piece of information. You might look at the winter, I think it's winter something or other that they have down at Home Depot as, sort of a mix of colors, and it really comes out nice. I used it for my backyard, so. Winter blend, yeah, winter blend, I think they call it.
Okay.
Is there
And I think
any,
it's appropriate, yeah.
Aaron, is there any, I don't know, possibility, that's not the right word, but opportunity or appropriateness to use like decking?
I think it's something that could be explored. I would say that it potentially could come at like an additional cost, both in installation and life cycle cost, just in
Okay.
terms of like staining and things like that. And if we went with a hardwood, that does come at, it's more expensive to install and hasn't been as resilient to some of the elements in my experience.
Okay. And I was
But-
thinking of the opposite, that it might be less expensive, but I don't really know. I like the paving better.
Mhm.
So I was just looking at costs and permeability.
Yeah, I mean, it's something we can ask them to explore as we're looking at materials. In my experience, it's not necessarily a lower cost per square footage for
Okay.
something that's going to be comparable in level of maintenance and sort of like that life cycle cost long
Right,
term.
right.
I'll write that note down though. Oops, sorry. Any other comments on those, or we're good to move on to the next column here? Okay. Yes to public art opportunities, maybe identify opportunities with places to add new art as funds become available. So whether that's, we have this wall blank, but we know that eventually a mosaic will be added there or something like that. A few ideas that I just kind of wrote down for art was, if we have bike lockers, painting them, that's something that they've done in some other cities to sort of have city branding and add some of that eclectic identity. Mosaics on seat walls, art as play structures, and conversation nodes in that sort of site furniture, which the image below is an example of that, where that feels very sort of artistic. And then that leads me to my next one, small gathering spaces and public art. So yes to seating as an art opportunity. I do we like that this furniture example specifically sets up the plaza as the community's living room, which I feel like I've heard that phrase in some of our conversations in the past. So I personally like that image in terms of what that says. Any comments on these two images that I should add?
Well, I agree with,
Go ahead, Bill.
I agree with the comment. Character of space feels too modern for Manitou. I sort of agree with that. I'm not quite sure what we do about it though, other than use individual movable furniture out in
Oh,
this
you're
area.
talking about this image down here.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, you're still up there. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'll get to that one in a second.
Okay.
I was going to say, Aaron, that I really appreciate your comment about adding art as time goes by and money comes up, because I can see this place as a real great opportunity to have really good art And I don't think in the next year we're gonna come up with that. So I think having just reserving space, the appropriate space is a good way, because we also, you know, we might want to put in a $50,000 piece of art, and that's just not within our budget,
Mhm.
but it could be in the future.
Well,
Okay, Aaron,
See, you know, once we build it, that might inspire other
Any
people.
other questions on those two? Are we good to move to the next ones?
well, is there going to be any
Nancy
kind of
or
reserved
Sheila?
space for shall I say, a signature sculpture of some sort in the plaza area? That we would have to find some artist to do, but it might be something that would be a nice amenity for the space.
Mhm.
Just an idea.
Yeah. Yeah, if there's a place we'd have to reinforce, you know, what the load bearing would be, but anticipating it. And I do have some
Right.
pictures later. I did incorporate some of those images that you shared, Tweed, because I think that's also a great example of how the space was set up to receive art for different events, which is pretty cool. Yeah, oops, sorry, went too fast. Okay. Yes to size and scale of the space shown. Like, I think that this is very much a conversation space, but that the feel of sort of some of the material choices and the angles feels a little bit maybe more modern than Manitou feels. But I do think that the programming intent of this image is something that we heard in terms of more of those, you know, smaller group of people that want to meet up here and maybe have a conversation.
Now, you know, we have, you know, I think it's worth discussing the borders, the concrete perimeter borders. Now, those are obviously angular and bland, but, you know, we have seat walls that are very Manitou-esque all over the city. You know, downtown is full of lots of these.
Right.
And then there's planters and other kinds of things around them. I do think it does a good job defining the space, separating the space. It also allows for different elevations, you know, a raised planter bed, lower benches, and Nancy, to your point, you know, if the wood is done in like Trex decking, you know, the synthetic fibers, that stuff's good for 30 or 40 years. That's what we do. Our picnic, our park benches are out of that stuff, you know. So there could be something along those lines that is Manitou-esque and matches it without looking so defined, but helps define the space vertically a little bit.
And if you're talking, I can't hear you. Maybe you're not talking to us.
I think she stepped away.
Okay, cool.
and I'm not married to the Trex stuff. I went behind the chamber and I saw the application that was put back there, and I'm a little worried about some interest in that for the plaza, and I just don't think it would be appropriate for what we're trying to achieve. So that's all. I'm looking for a lower cost that is permeable. But I really like, my first preference is the pavers.
Okay.
Well, and Nancy, we probably should discuss that, because if you can make the pavers permeable, or you can make them impermeable. And if you make them permeable, it's more expensive. You have to do things a certain way. You have to put proper drainage stone underneath it. And then they also will tend to be more of a maintenance issue. Not only, and you heard her say last week, as silts and fines accumulate, it seals up the pavers anyway, so you have to kind of vacuum them. But you'll also tend to get settlement, because now you have water going into the subgrade. Generally, like the middle drawing right there, those are sealed and generally considered an impervious surface. So that we just need to be careful about that. Like, we definitely will do water quality features, but it may not be in the form of permeable pavers.
Okay, and that's a good point then, Dole. And I mean, I think I'm just trying to anticipate.
Yeah.
what might be said. And, you know, currently it's not a permeable surface, so it's not like we're creating more impervious surface.
In fact, when we took the site over, it was 100% impermeable. It was all the building and parking lot. So whatever improvements we make will be an improvement for water, you know, sheet flow.
But you know, we did hear permeable very often. So I think if we're not able to do it, we need to highlight some of the other water
Yeah. And
measures
Susan,
we're taking, because that was important to people.
yeah,
Mhm.
we agree. And it's the kind of the thing where it gets thrown out there and people don't fully understand it. And it's okay that they throw it out there because it is important, but they just need to know the context. So, you know, we'll definitely factor that in going forward.
Yeah.
Okay.
We need to be a little careful with the permeable aspect of things, because after a season, you got all sorts of little growies coming up between the pavers, and it becomes sort of a maintenance nightmare. I've experienced that.
Yeah.
The next item I have here, unless there's more that wants to be discussed on this image, is events in the plaza. Yes to community-centered events and flexibility to relieve event pressure on other parks in the city. And we talk a lot about Memorial Park, but there's a potential for that to occur for other parks in the city as well. Yes to having tent space integrated into the plaza. And I think what I personally liked about this picture, as I feel like it reflects, you know, some of the comments we heard at the last meeting, is using that tent space that is more integrated or encapsulated by planting to sort of create a space, even when the tents aren't there. Yes to food trucks using parking spots at the north end, whether it's the ones directly north of the plaza or directly north of the building. No. And maybe this one might be a little bit less cut and dry and so for discussion, but no to vehicles in the plaza, because I don't believe we're anticipating the cost of vehicular paving in the plaza right now. And just the potential once you get vehicles in there as they maneuver to cause damage to different things if they don't know how to back up clearly.
So I think that's a good point. And fortunately, this, you know, for snow removal, the city now has some smaller equipment that can be used that's more maneuverable. So I think we can say that, Aaron, confidently that except for like snow removal and light duty maintenance equipment, no, you know, no heavy truck usage on the plaza.
Mm-hmm. Any comments on that from anyone else?
Good.
We're good? Okay. And then natural shade. I pulled this picture for natural shade because of what we'll get to the other one in a second. No, or preference to not have trees in paver grates or trees in tree grates because of the cost to provide adequate, you know, soil volume underneath that, I think is maybe not where we would prefer to spend our dollars. And that from a performance standpoint, we would want at least 500 cubic feet or more per tree to be provided with clearance around that tree that allows for any snow that is being accumulated to not be on the tree's, you know, immediate root ball. Just knowing what sort of, if there's, you know, salt or silt or all those different things that could accumulate through the snow and onto the soil. And that's something, and Jillian is on the call here, but sort of what we're choosing in terms of plants and those soil volumes and maintenance are going to be ongoing conversations with city staff and Matthew and Jillian as we move forward to make sure we're setting everything up for success long term.
What are silvacells?
Silvacells are basically like a crate. And I actually just got a picture from one of my past projects of them being installed. They are a higher cost per square foot because they're kind of like a crate, but they're specifically designed to take the load off of the soil that's underneath a tree, but has paving on top so that you're not having that compression. It allows for the roots to have more of a root zone because when they're surrounded by hardscape, that soil underneath the hardscape, if it's not supported by these sill cells or structural soil, doesn't have enough air in it to allow the roots to grow. We don't always think about air with trees and their root systems, but it is important as they, grow and thrive. And it usually just allows a little more permeability within that soil as well, long term. But they are expensive, so. Any other thoughts on that one? Okay. I'm going to go down now to the maybes. So these are ones where, whether it's the way the image is represented or the exact actual programming, we might be a little bit on the fence on. Picnic tables, we do like picnic tables, or the idea of, seating in places to eat, but that if they're permanent, not sure if we would want them permanently anchored somewhere due to, sort of that preference for flexibility in some of these spaces. The location where they might be appropriate, and I kind of thinking about this afterwards, might be, along in our creek site experience or in our conversations nodes, but not something we would want in that flexible open space that we would maybe anticipate using for music or fitness or pop-up events. And then yes to seasonal planting, but not sure if annuals are appropriate here, just because of the potential maintenance cost of installing annuals every year, and that annuals don't always have the same pollinator value as perennials or other plants. So that we're not that we're like a definite no to annuals, but only if it's very, sort of thoughtful and appropriate, and again, if maintenance allows.
Thank you for saying that, because I think annuals can be very beautiful if they're well chosen and
Maintained.
maintained. Exactly. Thank you. But I do agree with your put our maintenance and plant dollars toward adding pollinator value. I absolutely agree with that.
Awesome. Any other comments or thoughts on these ones? Okay. So fire pit, and this isn't one that's been identified for discussion in terms of different comments. And I need to adjust, I didn't adjust this text specifically after I'd gotten some of the comments, so I apologize. So maybe to a fire pit. I think what we heard at the community meeting was the potential for fire to be part of some of the different cultures and religions, and in terms of their ceremonies. So thinking of this as an event space that's welcoming and inclusive, that having an option where fire could be used safely for their different ceremonies could be helpful in terms of being inclusive to the different sort of communities reflected in Manitou's residents. If it was a gas fire, it would have to have a controlled use, and it would be turned on for events or turned off. And that would be something that would be, in a secure location where that would be turned on and off. If there is a fireplace there full time, it would be something that is sculptural. So it would be still visually appealing when it was off. Another thought that I had after last night, as I was thinking about this some more, was, with some of these conversation nodes that we're setting up, you could always sort of set them up where a fire pit could be located in them if there was a group that's renting out the space and needed it for a ceremony, but it might not be a permanent thing there. But that's why the conversation is happening around the fire pit, was from sort of that community input as it related to some of the different spiritual ceremonies that might require a designated space for that. And then yes to site lighting, maybe to lighting as art, since I know we're trying to move towards something that is dark sky friendly in terms of our light standards. So I'll pause.
And these are all maybes? Because I think site lighting is pretty important.
Sorry, maybe to site lighting as art is my
Okay,
maybe.
got it.
I'll clarify that.
Thanks. And and regarding the fire pit, I think that the coming up with some sort of probably a sculptural temporary, in and out kind of fire pit would be great. And it would have to be away from any overhead trees and so on, I would think.
A question on fire pit, Joel or Aaron, aren't there liability issues for the city if we've got a fire pit? And we've got little kids around and we've got, sort of no oversight. I know,
Flammable services.
I know it's probably gas, but I don't know, it just seems kind of,
Unnecessary.
well, I think it would be cool, but if I were, I don't know. it seems like
Susan,
it's liability.
I think in addition to the liability, the concerns, I mean, does anyone have access to it? Is it only staff that can turn it on, turn it off? Is it part of the rental agreement? I mean, it could get real complicated, in a hurry, Does it get abused? Are there marshmallows all over it because people drop it on there? I mean, I think it's okay to say maybe, but and maybe Aaron, you already commented that you'll fix that language, but lots of variables still to resolve regarding the fire pit.
Yes, and there are precedents for fire pits in public spaces. So one of the bigger places it was installed in the last couple of years. There's a Washington DC waterfront plaza that has them, and then Festival Park up in Castle Rock also has a fire pit there that they utilize. So if we did decide, we wanted to move forward, and I think this maybe that could be something that we reach out to the city of Castle Rock and understand how they manage their liability and risk with that there, because their fire pit there is permanent. A permanent fixture. It is more raised than what you'd see in a residential application. And the area that contains the fire is caged. So it's not like a residential application. There's a number of things that they've done in terms of designing of that fire pit to mitigate that risk. So I think it would be a good conversation, kind of like with the permeable pavers. We'd like them. We've heard from the community that that is something that they would like. So in terms of our sustainable decision-making process, we just need to look into what, does it make sense? Is it economically, responsible? Is it, safe? So I will change it to maybe, and I can make a note to see who we know at City of Castle Rock to ask about how they've managed that risk or what their experience has been since it's been installed. Because it's been in there for a couple of years, definitely within the last 5 years, it was completed.
Yeah, and I agree, Aaron, research would be a good thing. And I think we need to do that before. I mean, we shouldn't place the fire pit and say, we're not sure if it'll work.
Mm-hmm.
We're either convinced it'll work and we put it in, or we don't put it in the plan. Because, I just think for public expectations,
I agree.
that's better.
And then this image, kind of goes back to what we talked about in the yes column. Yes to natural shade, but no to trees and paver grates, unless there was a really good reason for it. Just from that sort of sustainable decision-making standpoint. Yes to movable yard games, but no to artificial turf. Unless people are really liking artificial turf, it has maintenance concerns of its own.
If it's being used as a functional play space like it is on the graphic, I think people would be a lot more receptive to it.
Mm-hmm.
If it's being used as like we're trying to have fake grass and it looks fake, that's different. But if it's being utilized as a community game engagement space, I think that could be usable. Because there's nowhere to do something like this anywhere else in town that I'm aware of,
To me, the turf, there should be no turf in this area anyway. It should be, you know, across the streets from Memorial Park where you've got a lot of turf.
Well, Nancy, I guess the point is what I'm saying is if it's being used as a game space, as an amenity space and not as a park, it could be well received.
Yeah, and I think there's games that could be using this space with the artificial turf. I think that's something we ought to investigate a little bit more.
And it just gives you year round the ability to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
In
You
terms
should say, Aaron, you should say artificial turf.
In terms of a space like this, and I guess this is where maybe I was thinking about turf maybe being not something we were as invested is in terms of some of these spaces or zones that I'm thinking about. If we have the lawn games as something that is occurring in the space where the event tents are going to be, or where you'd have cocktail hour from the building, that would maybe be more appropriate as a hardscape. But if there is room for it in the plan to have a designated games area, then I think, yeah, artificial turf would be appropriate there. The next image here, unless there's more comments on that one. Okay, the next two images here are raised planter beds and site lighting. Yes to raised, beds where appropriate. The image aesthetic is maybe a little bit more modern than we're looking for, but we like the intent of how raised planter beds can help create and define a space. Yes to catenary lighting opportunities, but would prefer to meet our safety lighting requirements with dark sky friendly lights and use catenary lighting at events or community events, so that we can be sensitive to migration patterns and dark sky friendly requirements.
Aaron,
But
I think
still
we'll make a note that those could be on their own switch from inside the building or something, and they would be like you just said, event specific and available, yeah.
You could also, event specific, you could put them up and then take them down after the event for that.
Or just, no one has access to turn them on except for like facilities folks, type thing where we know we have an event, it's been reserved, and they have the lights on until 9 p.m. or something. And I think that would also be, I think that also would apply to the fire pit. I do think it would have to be managed some way, so.
And then here are my no's. There are fewer, I think, flat out no's in some of those images. No to built shade that would pull focus from the historic structure. No to labyrinth, does not match. Oh, sorry.
So the built shade, I don't know if we say that that's a no. We have such a large space and we're going to have such small trees. It's going to be a long time before those trees are offering shade.
Right. So this is no to this specific type of shade structure. I do have on another image of another section where I've incorporated some of Tweed's images from the Santa Fe Plaza, sort of new imagery that I think reflects maybe more of the intent as something that could be taken up and taken down once the trees meet their maturity. And again, so just respects the view shed of the historic structure.
Okay.
But I could move this whole thing into a maybe. I think.
Well, I guess I didn't realize that we were talking specific about this, like Japanese inspired.
Yeah, for this one, that's. But I can. I'll clarify this here.
Yeah.
And just to comment on the historic aspects of the building. Originally, we had talked about putting a shade structure in that did match the original pavilion. There are small pavilions, like picnic pavilions out in front there. Mm-hmm. So I'm can't wait to see Tweed's pictures. And also when I see this sort of shade structure, all I can think of is putting solar cells on top to provide electricity. Mm-hmm.
No to labyrinths, as they do not match the energy of the space. And then this one, I will adjust the language on this structure because I think this is a very industrial interpretation of a structure, an overhead structure, without providing additional shade with this one.
And Nancy, were you the one that said it at our meeting? And I guess Aaron, we'll just wait till you get to your other drawings, your other
Yeah,
pictures.
okay. Oops, sorry. Then I talked about sort of programming, because I think one of the things, at least for me, in terms of how the images were describing it, was that some of their different zones didn't seem like they were really mutually exclusive in terms of functionality. So I took some of those site images that we I think we're affirming of, and classified them with some of these programming categories that they were using and where we see, sort of that overlap. So multi-purpose open space, in this area, we could have, tents for events like farmers markets, or if we wanted a community potluck outside, fitness classes, small musical performances, and then built shade like a shade sail, like what you're seeing in this image, which is something that as the trees mature would maybe be less necessary, or can be sort of, taken up or taken down as what it feels appropriate. Flexible, movable seating, building connections and sort of the reservable space. So if we have these open spaces, most of the time it would be sort of open to all, but having the option, I think we heard this in the from City Council as well as the recent public meeting, is that if you have spill out space, having that be sort of sectioned off. Hardscape and paving in these areas, and yard games would potentially be something that could occur in these multi-purpose open space areas. Play area is one that's maybe more of, we'll say, a rigid program, because you're not going to have, because of fall distances and just sort of safety concerns around anything that's a play structure, you do want sort of a clearance zone around those. And so I added this, I found this image of art as play, which is pretty cool. It's located in Georgia. But that whatever art is chosen for this area or play structure would reflect the character of Manitou. And then something that's a Creekside experience, not being 100% certain what that looks like yet, potentially something that has picnic tables, but allows for engagement with the creek, is an extension of the Creekside access that we're providing in the structure. And then conversation nodes. So integrated small conversation nodes that utilize playful seating and are nestled within planting areas. Potentially one of those nodes could be set up as a potential fire pit, per se. But again, we've kind of talked about that already. And then mobility. We are getting, we've heard the importance of this as a transportation hub for the community. So bus shelters, bike racks, bike lockers. We would want these things integrated into the site, maybe not into the core, but just sort of into certain features. We wouldn't want it to feel like a parking lot of bikes, and then potentially a bike repair station. I've included some images here of maybe what that could start to look like. We could use a classic bike rack, but then add sort of that Manitou character in other ways. Like there was one community that took the bike lockers and different artists got to do sort of different paintings on the outside. And then I've added some inspiration imagery here, in terms of site light being something that's more low lighting, still meets safety, but is a little bit, I'll say, cozier in terms of lighting. Choosing materials and site walls that reflect the spirit of the place, which I think the examples, Tweed showed, it really feels like, Santa Fe, even when you don't see, the art obviously adds to that, but even in the sort of careful curation of the materials or the form of the seat walls, it's not just your typical rigid concrete. It's been rounded and made to feel like adobe. And then one of the other comments, and I just added this can take on many different forms and functions. But one of the comments, I believe, was about wanting to make sure we're providing support for events in these plazas. A big barrier to that sometimes is electric and power, through generators or things like that. So finding opportunities to integrate this power into the site and camouflage it so that we can use it for musical events, potentially. I know Jillian has some great thoughts on this in terms of how it's functioned in other aspects of town, and working with parks and the design team to design these so that they're, as tamper resistant and vandal resistant as possible. They don't provide problems that way, but those I'll kind of stop. I talked for a long time there, but wondered if the programming here feels consistent with sort of the synergies that you guys perceive for how this plaza could function in some of these bubbles.
Question.
Mhm.
We've got a lot of stuff that we would really like to put in this plaza, but are we going to have enough room? It just strikes me that we're going to have to pare our list down a little bit at some point. And I don't know quite how to approach that. Maybe prioritizing what we put in and what we don't put in, but I think that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, I think, that's one of the reasons I took a look at the programming in this sort of multi-purpose open space, because when we start to make some of these spaces their own individual designated area, that's where we don't, we might not have room for each of them to have their designated area.
Right.
But yes, there are, it's like, well, how many conversation nodes can we have in a plaza of this size? Maybe it's 2 or 3, not, 10, because of the restrictions here. So.
Yeah. One other comment going back to the mobility slide. I think we need to take into account e-bikes seriously, because and some of those e-bikes are fairly heavy, and so we need to have bike racks that accommodate them. I mean, we're showing a lady in the lower left corner there lifting up a bike, and some of these e-bikes, you're not going to do that if you're a 5'2" and sort of frail.
Yeah,
Well,
I do think that, sorry, this image, just to clarify, is one of those like bike repair things. So I think she could do it on the ground. She's choosing to lift it up, but there are lower sort of tools as well. But yeah, no, it's not we wouldn't want wall mounted bikes in this plaza, or bike racks in the plaza.
Yeah. Okay.
And just in terms of mobility, Erin, a couple of things. One is wayfinding signage. I don't know if it would go into the plaza or someplace else within it, but it seems like near the plaza would be important, near the multi-mobility hub. And also, it's not just bikes that go into mobility, it's walkers. So I'm thinking, water station potentially. I suppose you could go into the restroom, but just a possibility would be a water station. But I feel very strongly about that. Wayfinding signage needs to be incorporated into it.
Well, the water station is important, because a lot of bicyclists, they'll come up to the water station, they'll fill up and take off. And so I think we do need an outdoor capability for water.
And Bill, also we're forgetting that this area services the parking lot that supports the incline.
Yes.
So all those people will
absolutely
come with their water bottles as well. So I think that this site is going to have an overwhelming demand, like an above average demand for water than would normally be expected for a site of this size, because it has it's so hiker. And even for those right in the cog, even there, they're going to fill up their water bottles. So, I think the water demand will be above, well above average for a site of what you would expect of this size.
Totally agree.
So thanks for bringing up the other users, Dole, because I think we have to keep in mind that mobility is not just bikers, it's everybody.
That's right, Nancy. And, maybe we make it, and Erin, I don't know how we would do this, but maybe we, instead of having it just be some water bottle filling station tucked into the corner somewhere, maybe it's part of, maybe somehow make it fancy.
It could be a sculpture.
Oh, what if we made a fake? What if we recreated one of the springs that looked like the springs, but it was just filtered water?
That's a good idea. I like that.
Yeah, I do think having that water bottle access, interior and exterior, makes sense in terms of all those different users and the times of day that they might be utilizing this space. If we did have, we'll say the restrooms are closed after a certain time because of, safety. Any other questions on these images? Any of these new images? Do we, want to say no? Please don't share that one again.
Well, we keep seeing these seat walls pop up, and I do think that they serve several purposes. They help separate space, and they do provide well seating. And then the fact that that one has an example of lighting, that's a way to tuck and hide outlets. So I do think some seat walls that match and meet Manitou's requirements strategically placed would be a good idea.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I have the comments here. I'm going to go to one more slide. I think I might come back to this. I changed the order on myself and now I'm second guessing it. But in terms of what we liked about where things were from those previous options, and maybe this is if y'all don't agree, and this is just me, please please speak up. I feel like I heard about the art and play being towards the north, but only if there's sort of buffer defensible space for it. The idea of the open plaza being more in the center of the plaza, I think makes sense as we had evaluated that door access on this side, and that building connection being closer to the building, obviously. They also, and I didn't highlight this in all three of these options, but their Creekside connection is labeled on here. It just wasn't given a bubble. And I think there's agreement potentially around those. Highlighting option 2, the planting buffer, or there being some sort of buffer at the north side because of the vehicles pulling in and out. And again, that building connection programming being off of that plaza entry zone and against the building.
I agree.
And then option 3, I think a lot of us really liked how the planting buffer was being used to create space. And again, having that building connection closer to the structure there. Let's see, let me read all of it. I said I touched on all of these. I'll zoom in on these a little bit more so they're just a little bit more visible here. Yeah, open space near the building and centered on the mid-door access, like the art and play being near a prominent entry for visibility and branding opportunities that represented. Sorry, I've got some typos here. I didn't try to do this quickly. Not a fan of public transit location or that node in option 2. Would prefer that the transit be included on the north and in these buffer areas, so that this stays more sort of community and gathering focused.
Can you make it a little bigger, Erin?
Yep. Sorry about that.
Thanks.
So this node here was something that I heard in comments was not preferred because it pulls more of that transit node into, or defining it as a public transit node into the plaza, and wanting to keep the plaza more community and gathering focused than sort of pass through focused with its programming. And then the last option, we like the idea of using the raised garden beds to create and define spaces within the plaza. The exact configuration shown here maybe is not preferred. And we liked how this option incorporates planting to create spaces, and that there's just a little bit, this feels like a greener option. And I know, and I've highlighted the building connection, but I know the fire ring underneath it is, we're on the fence about that. One thing I did to kind of capture those comments was, Bill, I was having some of the same thoughts of, how much space do we have? What does some of this programming need in terms of space? And so I first sort of simplified it as these zones, and it's sort of how we're sort of stacking them moving north to south, that you have some of these more maybe smaller group connections here along the creek, a little more of those contemplative spaces. And as you sort of move north, a little bit in terms of energy of the space, or how large of gathering it would be, or, the kids in terms of play. And then keeping a lot of that transit along the periphery as it reflects the sort of circulation paths of people that might be coming through transit, right? If they're coming through here, they're coming through here. This might be more of a minor connection. They're coming across the street and along the sidewalks as well. So that's, and then this can all, if you guys hate it, that's fine. I just had, I draw, and that helps me think things through, is I took what we liked about those other options and incorporated them here. So keeping the open plaza space centered on the building, allocating some open space along the building edge. We already have to have a 5-foot setback for fire mitigation in terms of any planting. So making that a little bit wider so that it could be, maybe fenced off for a cocktail, a bunch of cocktail tables for an event, temporarily. Having these conversation nodes here at the bottom and that artful play node here. I did scale these nodes based on other examples or precedents of these spaces. So like a conversation node would be typically about a 15-foot radius around. That I found that example that they shared in that image on Google Earth and measured it, and it's about 15 feet. Fire pits are usually about a 25-foot radius just because of the size of the gathering in a community type fire pit. And then I measured some of those play spaces if we had maybe 1 to 2 structures and their associated sort of fall zone buffers. The bus stop and amenities, I think one thing that we have the opportunity to do with this project is make that bus stop itself, bring it up to all these accessibility standards in terms of, boarding through the front door or the back door, that we have the associated clearance, and using the bike lockers, since they're already sort of an impermeable element, as part of that buffer to the north. And if we painted them so they could kind of be a branding element as you pull in as well. And then this is pretty a deep area over here to the north, and so potentially adding bike racks there, because I think we have the clearance that would be required to add some of them there, so you're not having a bike parking lot with multiple rows, which I think can get a little visually cluttered, and maybe becomes a much more of a barrier, which I think was another concern or comment. But that's I have these areas here as TBD, because I think that's one of our items for discussion. The fire pit is an item for discussion as well. I think this could be easily converted into a conversation node if a fire pit was sort of nixed in terms of feasibility. But those are just some of my thoughts, 100%. So trying to sort of filter what we've heard. But is there any comments on sort of what some of these conclusions were, or if this page here is worth sharing with the consultant team or not? That's fine. It's just sort of me thinking through and processing the comments that we'd heard.
Yeah, Aaron, I really like, I asked this of the consultant, but I really like how your drawing has the functional elements of the space identified. There is a functional connection from the side entryway to the bus stop, and then there's also spaces along the building. I like the fact that there's kind of defined spaces. I like the fact that I just felt like some of the consultants' layouts didn't let the space function as well. It was kind of cluttered, or it didn't make as much sense. It was kind of like they threw some things on a drawing, which is okay. You got to start somewhere. But like I look at yours and I think, we keep talking about these seat walls, and if that upper green buffer, if this one here, I don't know I think that's drawing on your screen.
Yep, I see it. Yeah.
Yeah. If that, if that was a nice Manitou style seat wall, right? And, and we had the big metal poles to do like the sails over those for shade structure, and those could be taken back down in the winter time. Then we could have some shade over the play area for the littler kids and that kind of stuff. I just think that this layout, as soon as I saw what you did, I was thinking, yeah, that's kind of what I've been envisioning in my mind.
Question?
Mm-hmm.
On the first zones you're showing transit? I'm a little confused by running buses into the space.
Oh, no, buses would not come into the space, just in terms of, I'll say, thinking about people who are using it for transportation use and the amenities that they would need. So buses would stay on this edge, but perhaps, the bikers are coming more into this space because they're, parking and using, our water refill station, or the restrooms, or, people that are parking and then parking here and either taking the bus up to the cog, or they're walking from here into downtown. So thinking about how their beginning and ending of their trip experience is.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, it's like
one other
transit users are using
Okay.
that space.
Yeah.
I
another
like connected the dots for me. You've gone kind of in a linear way to explain this layout, and I think it makes sense to me. So thanks for all the work you've put into this. In fact, why did we need the landscaper with subcontract to BVH? You could have just done it yourself.
No, I don't have all the software or anything like that. And it does take a team to sort of dig into these details and design all the details that they're going to design. This is my favorite part of the process. I don't like the construction documentation as much. So
question on the
In fact, task force, I think that we pretty much send Aaron's drawing to the consultant with our highlights, comments, and then let them do some things to scale. And Bill, I was going to mention, I think everyone is struggling with the scale of this site, but it's big. If you look at the dance hall, I mean, it's as big as the dance hall plus like 50% more, depending on how you want to measure. So, I mean, if this area is done well, it can serve a lot of purposes at once.
Sure. Yeah.
yeah, for a little bit of scale on the right image here, the pass through, and maybe some of these are things that we want to set as sort of minimums or preferred. The open plaza here, north to south, assumes 2 rows of tents on either side could be installed with about, we'll say, 15 to 20 feet down the center, so that you'd still have pass-through space. The area along the building is 10 to 15 feet wide, and that is typical with some of those outdoor patios that you might see in a more urban condition on a street. So that would have, you wouldn't maybe have 2 full rows of cocktail tables or like seating, but you could sort of triangulate it and get a few more. And yeah, I can't remember exactly my artful play radius off the top of my head, but then all of the, we'll say, major circulation lines, we've kept at more of a dimension of, we'll say, 8 to 10 feet wide, anticipating that sort of the way people stop and stand and look around. And then the minor pathways, we would, I think, want to set a minimum in terms of clearance of a 6-foot sidewalk or clear space for sort of pedestrian use, and just sort of keeping things as welcoming as possible.
A comment, if I might. Would you consider extending those arrows to show that people can enter the building through the doors adjacent to the additional structure? Yeah, in other words, the arrow in the center. Yeah, and the same for the south side of the building, because people are going to come in that way too.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would make it a little more clear as to getting from the parking lot into the area. That would help clarify what the people movement component is. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can update those to include it.
Okay.
For sure.
And Aaron, I think we're going to have to really clearly connect the dots between what the community told us and this, because this doesn't look anything like, or, their drawings. And the fact is that none of them are landscape architects.
Mm-hmm.
And we look, to demonstrate the concepts that were presented that night and how they're portrayed here.
Mm-hmm.
Because as I look at this, it looks like completely different from anything that was presented that night, and that worries me.
Okay.
Well, Nancy, I think that's good for us to be sensitive to. I think, Aaron, what if we changed, you have buffer. What if we went ahead and labeled some of those, planted beds, vegetated something, and went ahead and communicated what some of those potentially could be. And Nancy, one of the things that we got from that night was that it was very pollinator friendly of a group. There was less functional multimodal perspectives. So
Right, there are no artists there, there were no multimodal there. Well, there were, because Carl and Joan were there, but
right.
it
But
was
I
very heavy on gardening.
Mhm.
yes. So I think that we do that, Aaron. We label some potential planter bed locations. I think it would be fair to go ahead and identify some potential opportunities for art. Like you have that bike locker right next to the parking lot, next to that green buffer. I mean, maybe there's a good opportunity for some art right there. We go ahead and identify some of those things, so when people see these drawings, we've kind of held their hand of what we're thinking.
And I will say, our client team or our consultant team is going to take this and make it better. And they're going to resolve it into, some more of a form giving elements. And then if needed, I think once they finish that and we need to add more of those call outs, right? I think, that Nancy's talking about in terms of what we heard, the increased sort of planting or impervious surface that's being added in this option versus, we'll say, the previous option. I think that's definitely something we can do as we curate the content for public engagement. And then I'm going to go back to these. There were a couple topics that we didn't that I think we've got a few different comments on, or just a few different perspectives from the meeting or whatnot. I think we've talked about the fire pit, so we don't need to maybe talk about that more unless y'all want to. Food trucks is the other item of where they would be located as it relates to the accessible parking locations. Based on Tweed and Susan's comments about where that's located and, wanting to make sure people that are needing ADA accessibility have easy access to the plaza, I think makes so much sense. And I think perhaps based on sort of thinking about it, maybe the directive to the consultant team is, maybe there's ADA parking spaces that need to be in both of those locations and are set up so that if in an event they want 2 food trucks on the north side, we can, allocate more spaces elsewhere for accessible parking if it needs to be sort of there in terms of visibility and clear and sort of access. I think that was one of my concerns. Just if you're a business and you're parked over here, but everybody you're trying to serve is over here, they might not know that you're there and you're at that event. So if it was set up for an event with food trucks, perhaps more of these areas then become accessible parking. But on a regular, Tuesday when there's not food trucks present, having these as ADA parking spots makes a lot of sense. So those were some of my thoughts, but I just wanted to make sure we're giving, if that's not what the group feels, I won't say that anymore. So
I like that, Aaron, because that goes back, my overall arching theme here is functionality and flexibility. And what the proposal you just made maximizes that. And I guess the third thing would be ease of maintenance, but so I like having the flexibility there for the parking versus food trucks.
Any other comments? I know we're at over time, so don't want to.
Aaron, I really like your plan, and I really appreciate you summarizing all this in such an understandable way. You've done great stuff. Thank you.
I agree. Good job. Good
I,
job.
I agree also. I think it's super. I think we're really moving forward.
Yep, I agree as well.
Great. Well, if there's no other items, I did have practical items for consideration that I'm just going to share with them. So Jillian, if there's anything you see there that you disagree with, let me know. We can talk about it before I send it over to them. But I will add my comments, the comments we received on the call today, incorporate those, sort of export that PDF and send it over to them.
Could you also send it to all of us?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
That would be great.
Yep, for sure. Alrighty. Anything else we want to talk about today?
I just have one quick thing, and that is currently on the council agenda, the only date we have scheduled is November 21st. And I suspect that it was for site approval, and I think that was done a while ago. So at our last meeting, we came up with a couple of other dates that we were proposing for potentially, if we had to go, once we get tentatively, if we get the earthworks stuff back, if we have to go via an email or actually to council for a decision, we need to get that tentatively scheduled on council's agenda. And then I think it was in December that we were looking at for the overall approval, correct? So anyway, Aaron or Dole, if you could get those dates that we came up with last week and incorporate them or ask that they be put onto the agenda, that would be great.
Yeah, Nancy, I haven't done it yet.
Okay.
And Nancy, so I never know where to bring stuff up to the task force or internally, because it's always tricky. One of the things that, this project, I'm showing, and Nancy, part of it is you're going into the budget retreat this weekend.
Yeah.
And so we've been talking internally, all things being estimated, we think that we're about $600,000 short on the mobility and transit part of the project. So the bathrooms, the plaza, all of that stuff. Now we've applied for that CDOT grant, and that's potentially $250,000, which would be great. There's one of the things is we could ask PPRTA to borrow additional money from other agencies and then pay it back over time. That's how they funded the WAP job, the job on the east end of town, is that they borrowed $1 million from El Paso County and then paid them back. And Susan, maybe don't put this in the minutes just yet.
Okay.
And so Nancy, it could be something that you could bring up this weekend, is that would be an option for us to borrow the rest of the money we needed from PPRTA to fully fund the project and then pay back. It could be a series of City of Colorado Springs and El Paso County. Potentially we would do $200,000 a year for the next 3 years, or if we get the CDOT grant, then it would only be like $350,000 we'd have to borrow, and we could fully fund it and then pay them back over the next couple of years type thing.
And is that for the north building and the plaza?
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
it's the $3 million estimate is what we're thinking. That's what we got from BVH, and that's the bathrooms and the mobility hub. Okay, this Saturday is mainly for staff to educate council, and there's like a $6 million reserve at this point. And then I don't know if it's going to be this year or when the new council is seated that we're going to decide on how that $600 or the $6 million will be either kept in reserve or not. But this Saturday will be just education. Okay. But okay. I didn't realize there was a reserve, Nancy. I wasn't part of that. I didn't realize.
But I appreciate the heads up, because if the opportunity, if it presents itself, I will bring that up.
I mean, and really, it's just a way. I mean, we're not borrowing, we're not taking any of Manitou's money, but it allows us to leverage, because, the city of Colorado Springs gets $30 million a year from PPRTA. So if we were to go and borrow, $200,000 from them, they'd be fine with it. And then we could pay it back in future years, and it lets us get our project going,
Yeah, yeah. And as Jillian will tell you, now we've got a $3 million bill, $3.5 million bill for the pool potentially as well. So,
well, and that's the beauty of what I'm suggesting is we're not using any Manitou's money. It's just our PPRTA future capital money that we'd be allocating.
Right. So, okay, thanks. Anything else that Angela or Aaron, great job. I really appreciate the work that you've put into this because it helps a lot. Susan.
Just a request, Nancy, could we put on the agenda for 2 weeks from now, a discussion of the open house? I think we need to clarify expectations
Right.
and,
Actually, I was planning to meet next Thursday to get back. I thought this was just a special meeting and we'll meet next Thursday.
that's right, next Thursday. Anyway, could we put the open house on the
Ab-
agenda?
Absolutely, yeah.
And also, could we put on the agenda what we plan to present to council as far as being self-sustaining? I think we've set up some expectations that we're going to come back to council. I mean, as part of presenting the preferred plan, I think we also need to present a plan for self-sustainability.
Yeah, and Dole did a little of that the last time he presented to council.
Yeah, but I think we needed more information, he said, yeah.
And
Megan participating in our meeting, hopefully next week, we'll be able to address that to a certain degree as well.
Yeah, I think we've got a good idea on potential revenue, but I don't think we have a good feel for potential costs. I mean, we haven't ever talked about how much staff is this going to require and what are the operating costs and maintenance costs. I just think council expects that and we better have something ready to present.
So Susan, I think that it's important. I think you make a good point, and I think we could reach out to the city of Woodland Park and ask what their maintenance and commitment looks like. And then Aaron brought up that Castle Rock. Maybe we could ask them how they budget and plan. And then I think, Susan, that it'd be a good time for us to be thinking this, because we have to present to the match board, you know, coming up in early part of the 2024. And that might be something that we could help communicate how we're going to use their money as well, you know, for maintaining the dance hall and those events type thing, you know.
Yep.
Anything else from anybody?
Susan and Tweed, if you want to meet on, if it would be appropriate to meet on the engagement prior to next Thursday, just let me know. Or if we want to set up a meeting, you know, on Friday so that we can get off to the races, as it were, prepping for November 30th. I did reserve it. If we're assuming we're doing things similar to what we did last time, in terms of planning.
I think that's important to do, but I think we need to wait until after the task force discussion, because I think we need to set expectations. Are we doing a public information event or are we doing a public engagement event? And there's a big difference. If we're not willing to make changes to the preferred plan based on what we hear, it should be a public information. So we just need to talk that through. And then once we know that, then we can plan the event.
Sounds good.
And so Susan, you lead that discussion next week?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Because I just tell you, it was my understanding it was going to be a public information event versus public engagement, but I'll let you lead that discussion next week for us.
Yeah, Tweed and I'll be prepared to do that.
Anything else? Hearing nothing. Thank you all for taking the time out of your morning. And I know, I think it was well worth our time and effort. So that's all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.